It's pretty simple. We follow the money. We follow all the money. And thanks to President Trump's brilliant vision to decimate fraud across the country that has been fleecing Americans and our kids and our senior citizens for far too long, law enforcement finally has the backing to deliver like we are delivering here in the state of Ohio today. Thank you to Vice President J.D. Vance for leading the anti-fraud task force. In order to assemble this great team of individuals, you need true leadership across the country, and it starts in Washington, D.C. None of this work is possible without every single one of these individuals here and their teams at the state, local, and federal levels. It is truly a team lift, a unified effort under the Trump and Vance administration that has brought us here to just highlight some of the work that we are doing. Operation Playground Therapy is what the FBI is here to talk about today. As the Attorney General highlighted, literally tens of millions of dollars that was supposed to go to kids was stolen, allegedly, by individuals who worked in government and the private sector and thought they could fleece Americans and our treasure, our children, of the hard-earned dollars, the taxpayer dollars that we provide to support them in their time of need. Well, they got caught. And not only did they get caught, so many others got caught. Just take a look at some of the vehicles that are here as part of their ill-gotten gains and proceeds. They didn't just take the money, they paraded it around the country. And thanks to this team here, you are seeing what hard work, dedication to the rule of law, and true unified effort across all fronts when no one wants the credit and everyone wants to just do the work. These are the results that we're here to talk about today. Importantly for the FBI, and thanks to Vice President J.D. Vance's vision, he had an idea. He said, hey, you guys have a top 10 most wanted list for all gangbangers, terrorists, narco-traffickers, murderers, and rapists around the world. How about we have a top 10 list for most wanted fraudsters? So, Mr. Vice President, thanks to your vision, we're here to deliver, and you see it here today. It is live officially on the FBI website. I want all Americans to take a look at these most wanted individuals and look at the amounts, the tens of millions and billions of dollars in fraud that they have decimated our societies from. We rely on you. Our best form of information is the American public. Take a look at this top 10 most wanted.
On that stage in Ohio, Kash Patel did not walk up and deliver a boring government update. He walked up and dropped a political grenade wrapped in the language of law enforcement, children, senior citizens, taxpayer dollars, and fraud. He named President Trump. He thanked Vice President J.D. Vance. He pointed to Operation Playground Therapy, and he said tens of millions of dollars meant for kids had allegedly been stolen by people inside government and the private sector. Now stop right there, because this is where every American watching has to choose a side. Are you going to clap because the speech sounds tough? Or are you going to demand proof because power always sounds righteous when it is standing in front of cameras? Kash Patel's message was simple, on the surface. Follow the money. Follow all the money. Catch the fraudsters. Seize the luxury vehicles. Expose the thieves. And show the public that law enforcement is finally back in business. But underneath that clean slogan sits a much harder question, and it is the question Kash Patel did not answer in that moment. Who exactly controlled the money? Who failed to stop the theft? And who benefits politically from turning the arrest announcement into a victory lap? That is the frame of this entire moment. This was not just Kash Patel talking about fraud. This was Kash Patel building a courtroom scene without a courtroom, putting himself and the FBI in the role of prosecutor, putting unnamed fraudsters in the role of villains, and placing children, seniors, and taxpayers at the center of the moral damage. And to be fair, that is a powerful frame, because when public money meant for vulnerable people gets stolen, nobody should shrug, nobody should hide behind paperwork, and nobody should pretend this is just another bureaucratic scandal. If money meant for therapy, care, support, or basic public trust was allegedly turned into private luxury, then yes, the public deserves anger, accountability, and consequences. But here is where the suspicion begins. Kash Patel used big numbers, big names, and big enemies. He talked about tens of millions here, billions overseas, scam centers in Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, the Middle East, and even arrests in Dubai. That sounds massive, and maybe parts of it are massive. But in prosecutorial mode, we do not just ask whether the speech sounded strong. We ask where the filings are, where the audit trail is, where the evidence sits, and whether this announcement is justice being done or politics being performed. Now let's put this in prosecutorial mode, because the second Kash Patel says, "We follow the money," the standard changes immediately. That phrase sounds clean, tough, almost impossible to argue with, because no honest person wants fraud protected and no sane taxpayer wants public money stolen. While families are struggling to pay bills, raise kids, care for aging parents, and keep their heads above water. But if Kash Patel wants the public to believe this is not just another polished government press event, then follow the money cannot stop at a microphone, cannot stop at seized vehicles, cannot stop at a website update, and definitely cannot stop at a political thank you list. The money has to be traced from the original public program, to the agency that approved it, to the contractors or officials who touched it, to the bank accounts that received it, to the purchasers that transformed public trust into private comfort.
Let us know any information. There is no bad piece of information. The only bad piece of information is the one you don't give us. So call 1-800-CALL-FBI or go to FBI.gov and help us apprehend more fraudsters. The last thing I want to talk about is the work of the FBI and the interagency isn't just domestic. The fraudsters have created programs overseas that have fleeced Americans of billions of dollars. The FBI has led that charge against scam center compounds stood up in Southeast Asia and the Middle East, freeing thousands of trafficked workers. Just in the last year under the Trump and Vance administration and the fraud initiative, we have captured and freed $8 billion in fraud in scam centers that were stood up by the CCP and other adversaries in places like Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia, and the Middle East. And we're working with our interagency and partners across the world to bring hundreds of individuals to justice. Just the other week in the Middle East, in Dubai, we arrested 300 individuals responsible for $4 billion in fraud. They prey on our senior citizens here from overseas. And this administration has made it abundantly clear there is no distance we won't travel to make sure we apprehend each and every one of these individuals. The FBI is leading the effort to scuttle these scam centers permanently, to free the traffic workers, and most importantly, to also secure our taxpayer dollars and make sure that this $8 billion and counting in scam center fraud that the FBI has delivered on so far only continues to grow. And we're going to keep doing it. I just want to thank the Attorney General, the interagency partnerships here, state and local. I've said it over and over again. The FBI's best partners are state and local law enforcement, and they're here today, and these are the results. And it's now my honor to introduce the Assistant Attorney General for the Fraud Task Force, Colin McDonald.
And that is the first real test of Kash Patel's speech. Not whether it sounds like justice, but whether it shows enough of the machinery behind the accusation for ordinary Americans to know they are watching accountability instead of theatre. Because listen carefully to what Kash Patel actually did. He said money meant for children was allegedly stolen. He said people in government and the private sector thought they could fleece Americans. He pointed to vehicles as ill-gotten gains, and he framed the entire operation as a unified win under President Trump. Vice President J.D. Vance, the FBI, the Justice Department, state officials, local law enforcement, and federal partners. That is a giant stack of authority, and it works emotionally because it makes the viewer feel like every serious institution in the room has already looked at the facts and reached the same conclusion. But the word allegedly is not a decoration. It is the legal warning light flashing in the middle of the whole speech, reminding everybody that accusations still require proof, seizures still require process, and public outrage still has to pass through court. So, the sharp question is this. When Kash Patel says they got caught, is he speaking as a law enforcement official carefully announcing charges, or as a political performer already delivering the verdict before the public has seen the evidence? That matters, because fraud cases are not won by strong adjectives. Fraud cases are won through records, invoices, payment chains, shell companies, false claims, witness testimony, subpoenas, forfeiture filings, bank documents, digital trails, and a timeline that shows intent instead of just creating suspicion. If a person steals money meant for children, expose them fully, prosecute them aggressively, recover every dollar possible, and put the evidence where the public can see that the system worked. But if the government takes an investigation, wraps it in campaign-style language, attaches it to famous names, and asks the public to applaud before the receipts are fully visible, then we have another problem sitting right next to the fraud. That problem is power learning how to use moral outrage as a shield. And this is where Kash Patel's speech becomes dangerous in a very specific way. He places children and senior citizens at the emotional center of the story. And that is not wrong if they were truly the victims. But it is also the oldest trick in public messaging. Because once children and seniors are placed on the screen, anyone asking questions suddenly looks like they are defending the criminals. No. Asking for proof is not defending fraudsters. Asking for proof is defending the country from a government that wants applause before cross-examination. The moral issue is not whether fraud should be punished. The moral issue is whether the people with badges, podiums, cameras, and political protection are willing to meet the same standard they demand from everyone else. Then came the top 10 most wanted fraudsters idea, credited directly to Vice President J.D. Vance, and that part is politically brilliant. It takes the familiar FBI most wanted concept, usually associated with terrorists, cartel figures, murderers, and violent fugitives, and repackages fraud as a national enemy category that ordinary people can understand instantly. From a communications standpoint, it is sharp, simple, and almost made for television. Put the faces online, show the dollar amounts, ask Americans to call 1-800-CALL-FBI, and turn the public into an information network. But again, the legal and ethical question comes crashing through the wall. Who gets placed on that list? Under what standard? With what review process? And how does the FBI prevent a public shame list from becoming a political trophy board? Because when the government puts someone's name and face in front of the country, the damage begins before trial, before verdict, before appeal, and before a judge ever says the final word. That is the contradiction sitting inside the whole performance. Kash Patel says no one wants credit and everyone just wants to do the work. But then the speech carefully distributes credit to President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, the Trump-Vance administration, the Attorney General, the FBI, and the interagency team. That does not automatically make the operation fake. But it does tell us the announcement is not only about law enforcement, it is also about political ownership of law enforcement success. And when law enforcement success becomes political branding, Americans have every right to get suspicious, because the same government that can expose fraud can also exaggerate, simplify, and stage manage the story until the facts become background music. So yes, follow the money, Kash Patel. But also let the public follow the evidence, follow the charging documents, follow the forfeiture records, follow the court dates, and follow the accountability all the way back to every official who allowed this system to be looted in the first place. And now, the speech moves beyond Ohio, beyond Operation Playground Therapy, beyond the vehicles sitting there like props in a public morality play, because Kash Patel takes the fraud story overseas and turns it into something much larger than a local corruption case. He talks about scam center compounds in Southeast Asia and the Middle East, names places like Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Dubai, and says the FBI has helped free thousands of trafficked workers while capturing and freeing billions of dollars tied to fraud. That is not a small claim. That is a global law enforcement claim, a national security claim, a human trafficking claim, and a taxpayer protection claim all packed into one fast-moving statement. And again, the emotional force is obvious. Because if foreign scam centers are targeting American senior citizens, if trafficked workers are being forced to run fraud operations, and if hostile networks are draining billions from ordinary people, then no serious person should treat that like a minor issue. But serious issues require serious proof, and the bigger Kash Patel makes the story, the more responsibility he has to separate verified facts from political heat. Because this is where the public has to slow down and notice what was said and what was not said. Kash Patel said scam centers were stood up by the CCP and other adversaries. He said billions were connected to overseas fraud. He said 300 people were arrested in Dubai. And he said there is no distance this administration will not travel to bring people to justice. That sounds like a declaration of war against international fraud. And in plain American language, that sounds satisfying. Because people are tired of watching elderly parents get robbed through phone calls, fake investment schemes, romance scams, crypto traps, and fake government threats. But Kash Patel did not explain the exact legal bridge between every place named, every dollar counted, every person arrested, and every government accused. And when a law enforcement figure names foreign enemies, billion-dollar numbers, trafficked workers, and American victims in the same breath, the public deserves more than confidence. The public deserves clarity. Here is the deeper problem. Fraud is real. Foreign scam networks are real. Seniors are real victims. And the anger people feel about that is completely justified. But truth can still be damaged when real pain gets turned into a political weapon. If Kash Patel wants to say the FBI is leading the charge, then show the charge in a way citizens can verify. Which cases? Which indictments? Which agencies? Which courts? Which recovered assets? Which victims compensated? Which trafficked workers protected? And which officials are accountable when the system failed? A government that says, "Trust us," while standing beside seized vehicles is not the same as a government that opens the record and lets the public inspect the chain of evidence. That difference matters because Americans are not just spectators in a crime drama. Americans are the people paying the taxes, receiving the robocalls, watching elderly relatives get targeted, and then being asked to believe that the same institutions that missed the fraud are now completely clean because a press conference says so. That is where suspicion becomes not cynicism, but civic duty. And personally, this is the part that bothers me most. Kash Patel is using the language of moral rescue, and that language is powerful because children and seniors are not abstract policy points. They are the people every decent society is supposed to protect first. But when a public official speaks that way, he is not allowed to use victims as emotional armor while leaving the hardest questions unanswered. If kids were robbed, name the failure points. If seniors were preyed upon, explain how the networks operated. If taxpayer dollars were stolen, show how the money escaped oversight. If the FBI is asking Americans to submit tips, then the FBI should also give Americans enough public information to understand what kind of justice is actually being built. Otherwise, the public is being asked to join the prosecution emotionally, before it has been allowed to examine the evidence rationally. That is why this moment is bigger than Kash Patel. This is about whether law enforcement can fight fraud without becoming a political stage, whether a government can protect victims without using victims as campaign lighting, and whether powerful officials can announce victories without turning due process into an afterthought. Nobody should defend fraudsters. Nobody should excuse scam networks. And nobody should shrug when money meant for children or seniors disappears into private hands. But the answer to corruption cannot be blind applause for another powerful man at another podium, especially when that man is surrounded by big names, big numbers, and a very convenient narrative about who saved the day. The real test is not whether Kash Patel can make fraud sound evil. The real test is whether he can prove, case by case, dollar by dollar, victim by victim, that the system is actually delivering justice instead of just selling the image of justice. So here is the lesson, and it is not comfortable. A country that cannot protect public money meant for children, seniors, therapy programs, and vulnerable families is already in moral trouble. But a country that lets powerful officials turn that failure into a political victory lap before every receipt is laid on the table is in even deeper trouble. Kash Patel may be right that fraud has been eating through public trust like termites through a courthouse floor. And he may be right that law enforcement finally needs the muscle, the backing, and the coordination to chase the money wherever it goes. But being right about the existence of fraud does not automatically make every claim clean, every number verified, every arrest meaningful, or every press conference honest. That is the part too many people miss when they hear a tough speech and immediately mistake volume for proof. My personal view is simple. Punish the fraudsters hard, but do not let Kash Patel, J.D. Vance, President Trump, the FBI, the Justice Department, or any administration package justice like a campaign commercial and expect the public to clap without checking the fine print. If people in government stole from children, expose them. If private contractors helped drain taxpayer money, prosecute them. If overseas scam centers preyed on American seniors, destroy those networks and bring the victims as close to restitution as possible. But also tell us who missed the warning signs, who approved the payments, who signed the contracts, who ignored the complaints, who watched the money move, and who inside the system benefited from looking the other way. Because real accountability does not just punish the thief at the end of the chain. Real accountability walks backward through every locked door, every rubber-stamped form, every quiet office, and every official who had power before the cameras arrived. That is how you know whether a government is truly cleaning house or just showing you the one room it already swept. And that is why this Kash Patel moment deserves suspicion. Not automatic rejection, but serious suspicion. He gave America a strong story. Follow the money, protect the children, defend the seniors, catch the fraudsters, hunt the scammers overseas, and prove that law enforcement is back. Fine. Then let the same standard apply to him. Follow his claims, follow his numbers, follow his evidence, follow the court records, follow the recovered assets, follow the victims, and follow the political credit being handed out on stage. Because the question is not whether fraud is evil. The question is whether the people claiming to fight fraud are brave enough to let the public audit their own performance. So, where do you stand? Do you want justice, or do you just want a speech that sounds like justice? Do you want fraud exposed, or do you want another polished announcement where power congratulates itself while the people are told to trust the process? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if you want real accountability. Share this with someone who still believes public money should be tracked to the last dollar. And subscribe for more breakdowns where we do not worship the podium. We cross-examine it.